Okay, so good morning to all of you. It's an absolute pleasure and rather an overwhelming experience to look at such a massive audience. Now, the topic which I'm going to talk to you about today is not so much about supply chain of materials, because I don't think I can teach you anything about the material supply chain. You are the experts in the subject matter, but what I would want to venture into talking today to you about is the idea supply chain. And as we all understand, we are living in the knowledge economy. And what is important is that before the materials flow, the idea has to flow. And many times even idea is the material. Now, if you look at the various economies in the world, you would quickly realize that some of the most developed economies in the world have a very high share of services. In India, it is as high as 56%. In America, it is higher than 80%. So most developed economies in the world have a very high share of services. And if you are still rooted in a product mindset, then I think we are missing out the whole bus. The ideas. If you look at the last 10 years alone, some of the most valued companies in the world, ranging from Uber to SpaceX to Xiaomi and all these organizations, they have a huge amount of intellectual capital which is flowing through. And many times an idea has to reach to the market before the product reaches to the market, which is to create the very market. So the title that I have for all of you is that the value chain of innovation, from insights to impact. Now, when you talk about innovation, this is what I'll take you through about. The first is the journey of innovation, that what is innovation and what is not innovation. Then we talk about the 3 stages of innovation, which is insight, ideas, and impact. What I would strongly recommend all of you to do is to don't get distracted with your cell phone messages and WhatsApp messages, because I think if you are physically present in the room, you might as well be mentally present in the room. I just don't believe in that concept at all. So try to be mentally, emotionally, and physically available in the room. Feel free to interject and ask questions if you have, and we'll try and see what best we can do with the available time that we have here. First thing first, let us understand what is innovation and what is not innovation. We have been using these 2 words, innovation and creativity, very loosely. So much so that we think that innovation is same as creativity. They're not. Innovation and creativity are 2 very different concepts altogether. Let us get an understanding of these 2 concepts. What is creativity? So creativity is the ability of an individual or a group of individuals such as yourself to think of an idea. That is it. That's creativity. Now, what is innovation? Innovation is the ability of an individual, or rather a group of individuals, to commercialize an idea. So creativity is about generating ideas, innovation is about commercializing ideas. And most of us delude ourselves into thinking that if you have a great idea, the work is done. So much so that many companies have very loosely started thinking that if I file a patent, I'm innovating. Now, if you look at the total number of patents filed in the world, there are some surprising statistics which I want to offer to all of you. If I plot the world's most innovative companies on one column, the companies which have the highest R&D spending on second column, and the companies which have highest number of patents granted on the third column, mind it, granted, not just filed, the degree of correlation is 0. 0. Okay, it's not low, it's actually 0. Which means it doesn't matter how much R&D you do. What matters is what do you do with that R&D. If the end of the R&D is filing a patent, then that's not innovation, that is at best invention. And hence what is critical is for us to understand the entire value chain of the idea, and the value chain of the idea goes something like this. The first stage of innovation is an insight. The second is an idea, and third is the impact. So let us reduce innovation into these 3 stages, which is the insight, the second point is the idea, and the third is the impact. And I'll spend about a few minutes on each of these stages and try to give you a few best practices that you can take back to your organizations. You might be a small company, large company, running your own company or running somebody else's company. Each of these things are very, very useful to all of you. Now, first thing that I want you to understand is insight is not same as an idea. Let me give a simple example of what is insight and what is not an insight. Now, let us go back to this medical procedure. Now, whenever you go to a hospital, in case you have a bandage, right, you would realize that the hospital staff would always remove the bandage fast. They don't peel it slowly. They yank it out. Now, world over, it has been an interesting theory of investigation that how should a bandage be removed? Should you yank out the bandage or should you peel it slowly? Now, there was a faculty in the US, a professor, researcher in the US, And he is Israeli. And he was once performing an experiment in his lab in Israel. And what happened to him is that in his lab, something blew out of proportions and he burned. He suffered some very serious third-degree burns on 80% of his body. And it took him almost 2-3 years to recover. Now imagine if 80% of your body is covered with bandage. The question that bandage should be removed fast or slow becomes an existential question, isn't it? Because it's happening on a daily basis for the next 3 years on 80% of your body. So the question that he wanted to ask is that, what is the best practice of removing a bandage? Slow or fast? Interesting question, in fact. And then increasingly, all the nursing staff, all the doctors would just yank out the bandage, and that would pain him on 80% of the body. So he asked the senior officials, and he said that, what is a good practice? And they said, well, we have all been told that remove the bandage. Just yank it out. And he said, but it hurts me. And if I'm the customer, if I'm the patient, if it hurts me, then how can it be a good practice? It can't be good practice. Now, if you look at pain, since most of you may be engineers, let us draw the graph of pain. What is pain? On the x-axis is time, or the duration of pain, and the y-axis is intensity of pain. So this is the intensity and this is duration. And this is how the intensity goes with duration. And the area under the curve is total pain. Intensity multiplied by duration. Now what happens is this. You as a patient suffer the intensity and the pain, but the nurse on the other side, what does she experience? The intensity or the pain, or the duration or the intensity? What does she experience of the pain? Duration. She doesn't experience the intensity. Now what she does? Her pain is in looking at your face, which is in pain. So she reduces her duration and increases your intensity. And that's why nurses remove the bandage fast. So nurse is not solving your problem. She's solving her problem. And that is called insight. Insight is that aha moment that lights up in your head, that aha, that's why things are not working. It took a lot of time for Ratan Tata to realize, aha, that's why people are not buying Tata Nano. His theory was very simple. If I make an affordable car and give it to people at close to 1 lakh rupees, people should buy. Now, what's wrong with that? But the insight which you forgot in the whole journey, and that is where Tata Nano's case study has been beaten to pulp. But I think the key insight which I want to offer to you is that what you think that the customer wants is not necessarily what the customer wants. And hence, most failed innovations don't start with insight. They start with idea. I have an idea. I come from Bangalore, and that's the startup capital of the country. And I have, every other day I encounter budding entrepreneurs who come to me saying that, sir, I have an idea. And the next question I ask him, so what's the problem? What's the problem that your idea is solving? Now, idea without a problem is a failing start altogether. Now, in organizations also, I've been realizing, and I've been consulting with several companies now, and I'm realizing that most companies have ideas looking for problems. Not problems looking for ideas. They have ideas looking for problems, because most managers, most leaders don't define the problem tight. Just define a problem loosely. They say that give me ideas which can increase my revenue. Give me ideas which can reduce my cost. Versus defining the problems tightly. Let me give you an example of a tight problem definition. A tight problem definition would sound something like this, that how do I reduce my attrition by 10% without increasing my cost of operation by no more than 2%. The moment I give this idea or this kind of a question to the people, then the people start thinking tightly. And the first submission to all of you, ladies and gentlemen, is the fact that constraints liberate creativity. Constraints don't kill creativity. Constraints liberate creativity. If you look at some of the most innovative countries in the world, whether it is Israel or Singapore or Taiwan or South Korea or increasingly and lately, of course, Japan, all of these countries have demonstrated one thing, that it is not the resources that matters, it's the resourcefulness that matters. If resources were the key, then the most successful countries in the world should have been the African countries. The best resources are with Africa, but aren't African countries the poorest countries in the world? In spite of all the resources. So it is not about resources, it's about resourcefulness, it's not about the idea, it is about the insight. It's not about the answer, guys, it's about the question. As a manager, your job as a leader, and this is not just for the people sitting in the first couple of rows, it goes all the way down. As a manager, you're not supposed to solve problems. If you solve problems, then I don't think you are being a good manager. As a manager, you are supposed to define the problems which are worth solving. Am I making sense to you? So from this tendency of rolling your sleeves and getting into the act of solving it, कि आपसे नहीं होगा मैं करता हूँ, I don't think that is a good approach at all. We fail to delegate, we fail to develop the next cadre of leadership, and of course we fail to think through. And keep this in mind that not every problem is worth solving. Not every problem is worth solving. You need to choose which is the problem which is worth solving. So let me tell you another example. I was at Hyderabad airport a couple of days back, middle of the night. Even this little journey had started at 2 a.m. from New Delhi. So I had a flight at 2 a.m. from New Delhi and I just landed a couple of hours back. So that's how the life has been, unfortunately. So at the Hyderabad airport, I'm telling you the CISF security routine. So the routine is that I join this queue, I show my boarding pass. The person sees my boarding pass, he lets me into that queue. I jostle through the barricade, I pick up a tray, I take my laptop out of my bag, place it on the tray. So now I'm holding the bag in one side and the laptop and the tray like this on the other side. And I'm finding a place to place it on the conveyor belt. First goes the tray, then goes the laptop back. Again I come to this another queue where there are a couple of people standing in front of me. I go through this metal detector and then I go to the CISF guy who frisks me. I come back, I wait for my trolley to come, I pick up my laptop, put it in the bag and I move on. In this entire journey, what is the most painful part of the journey? Tell me, you've all been through that, of course. What's the most painful part?
Apprehension of it getting lost.
Very good. What else?
Removing it, keeping it again, washing that.
Yeah. I think for me personally, the most painful part is to take my laptop out of my bag. Because that's a very annoying thing and I really wish that we had technology to scan the laptop within the bag. Now here is the CISF guy. When I get onto this podium and when he is scanning me and I show him the boarding pass that, sir, please stamp the boarding pass. You know what he does? He takes the pass to this big scanner, huge scanner which is sitting there. He scans it and he says, yeah, you're through. I don't have to stamp it. Now, instead of stamping my pass, he's scanning my pass, which is a machine which is 10 lakh rupees sitting there. And he's saying, sir, you can go. And I said, well, now whose problem is he solving? By not stamping and scanning, whose problem is he solving? His problem and not my problem. Because I'm still standing for the exact same time. In my priority list, whether the pass gets scanned or stamped is the least of my priorities, isn't it? How is it helping me? He's solving his problem with a device which is 10 lakh rupees sitting there. Because some IT company would have fooled the CISF guys into thinking that this is the best technology we have got. So one thing that I want all of you to bear in mind is don't solve your problems, solve customer problems. If you continue to solve customer problems, customers will continue to like you and of course pay you the money. The extreme example of solving the customer problem comes from this company called Amazon. The company was founded in 1994. They made their first profits about a decade back in 2003. Every meeting in Amazon, every meeting, mind it guys, in Amazon has an empty chair. There are still some empty chairs in this room also, but that is not by design. In every meeting in Amazon, whether it's a board meeting or all the way down to town halls, there is always an empty chair. And Jeff Bezos tells you, and when he kind of talks to the people, and people ask him that, why do you keep empty chair? Is it for the CEO to come and sit there? Is it for a latecomer? What's the deal there? And he says, you know what, the empty chair that we have in the room is for the customer. And he says to everybody that whenever you have a meeting, whenever you have a discussion, keep in mind there is a customer sitting there watching you. And the moment you know that there's a customer sitting there watching you, you know that I have to serve the customer, because frankly speaking, who is paying your salaries? Who is paying the money that got you to buy these suits and the ties and the trousers? It's the customer, one form or the other. None of us have these investors breathing down the neck, it's the customer. Companies like Johnson & Johnson takes this thing even further up. There, of course, there is a J&J facility in Aurangabad. Johnson & Johnson, I got to know, takes this logic even one step further. They say that in Johnson & Johnson, every time we have a meeting, there is another chair sitting empty there. And now nobody is sitting on the chair. Instead, there is a placard on the chair. And you know what the placard reads? The placard reads, customer is waiting. Now, how powerful is that? Customer is waiting for you. Which means don't talk nonsense in the meeting. Don't waste people's time, because the time you are wasting in the meeting, there is somebody dying without your medicine. And that's the meaning of customer centricity. Don't be centric about yourself. I'll give you a simple example. Another example will bring home the point. We are sitting in this ITC hotel, Rama. Imagine in the next conference room, there is another meeting going on, which is about 100 people in the room, which is the entire staff of ITC, this hotel, Hotel Rama, the entire staff of ITC, and they're making their 3-year strategy roadmap, 3-year plan. And in the 2 hours of meeting that they are making in the strategy plan, none of the 2 hours, there is even a single mention of you, the customer. It's about their own employees, about their brand, it's about their performance, their productivities. None of the discussions of those 2 hours is about you. What is your likelihood of coming here again? High or low? Low. Why low? Because your service provider don't have you in the mind. Ask this question to yourself. Customer is the true north, guys. And if it means to kill your own product, so be it. Amazon has proven it again. And there are companies who fail to kill their product, and in the end, the customers kill them. Eastman Kodak is a great example. Am I right? When we were all growing up, there wasn't any picnic without the Kodak moment. It's not that we have stopped taking photographs. As a matter of fact, we are taking more photographs than ever before, except that we don't relook at those photographs that we often take so voraciously, of the plane taking off and of the sunset and of these selfies. How many times do we visit it? The irony of the situation is that the first digital camera was actually built by Xerox in 1973. A 0.1 megapixel camera was built by, Kodak, not Xerox, Kodak in 1973. But they were so obsessed with their core competence that my core competence is celluloid. My core competence are those rolls. And this stupid thing is a distraction. Sell it off. They were actually looking for someone who can take all the patents and take this nonsense out of their room, and they spotted a Japanese company by the name Sony. And rest, as you know, is a history. So another important point for all the leaders sitting here is that be careful about your core competence, guys. Your core competence can become your core rigidity. Your core competence can become your core rigidity. And when I say your, it's not just about your company, it can be even your personal core competence. What you thought is your real core competence can quickly become your core rigidity, because times are changing. The biggest companies are not the ones who have more wealth, but they are the ones who are playing the game differently. Very different ways in playing the games. So let's move on to the 3 methods we have here. The first is about insight, and I want to roll a video for all of you and demonstrate the point that whenever you are trying to solve a problem, the first thing you need to develop is empathy, samvedanshilta. How to be empathetic, how to understand people's stated and unstated need. Most innovations fail because you have an agenda and you go to the market and convince others that this is good for you. And they say, no, I don't think it's good for me. Let's look at 3D television. How many homes have 3D television today, world over? Anybody in this audience having a 3D television at home? That's a great technology. Gives you great experience. But why don't people have 3D television at homes? Even the richest of the rich. Why? Because how do you watch television? Do you just wear those glasses and watch television like this? How do you watch television at home? Relax, leisurely, family, with family, doing some parallel activity like eating food or talking to others. So television watching in India and most parts of the world is a communal affair. It's not an affair where you're really looking at the quality of the picture. This is either a distraction or an entertainment or a side business at best. And hence a great technology doesn't mean a great solution, doesn't mean a great market. And hence the starting point of innovation is empathy. Are you listening? Let me roll this video for you. This video is of a great Indian by the name Satya Nadella, who is currently the CEO of Microsoft. And this video talks about his personal life, and he's saying that how is he transforming Microsoft from a company which, believes that it knows it all to a company that learns it all. And if Microsoft can fail, I don't think any of you are immune. Another company which is failing as we're talking right now is GE, General Electric. Last year, GE made $4 billion of losses at a revenue of $100 billion. $4 billion might not be the revenue of many companies sitting here right now. That's the kind of loss that they're able to bear. And who started GE? Thomas Edison. Thomas Edison started GE, the guy who invented the electric bulb, 140 years back. So if a 140-year-old company started by Thomas Edison can die a slow, painful, natural death, who is immune? None of us. So the point is, be empathetic to the people. Don't go with what they are saying, go with what they mean. At least don't go with what you want to say. So let me roll the video for all of you, and I would strongly request you to please take notes. You're all here to learn, I'm supposing. Socializing keeps happening, but I don't think content without contacts takes you too long. So keep that in mind. So let us roll the video here.
Your first child was born with cerebral palsy. He is now 21 years old. So how did you realize that was going to change your life, and how have you dealt with that issue?
Yeah, even I was 29 years old when Zain, our son, was born, and if you had even asked me maybe even an hour before he was born what was going through my head, it was all about, oh, is the nursery going to be ready? What's going to happen to our weekends now we have a son? And when will Anu, my wife, get back to a job, and so on. But obviously everything changed that night. He was born because of an undetected in utero distress, asphyxiation, with severe brain damage, and that led to cerebral palsy, and he's quadriplegic now. The first, I would say, David, maybe even 2 years or more even, I was more about, like, why did this happen to me? What happened to us? And all of these plans that I had are now all been thrown up in the air and changed. Whereas Anu, my wife, what came naturally to her as a mother was, she said, okay, I'm not going back to my job. I'm going to really care for my son, drive him around for the, therapy after therapy. And I watched that. Without schooling me, I got schooled that nothing happened to me. What happened was to my son, and that it was time for me to understand that, realize that, see life through his eyes, and then do my duty as a father. That, to me, perhaps, it didn't come in one moment. It's something that I think took time. But as I figured it out, it changed me, both as obviously a parent, but also who I am today and how I approach everything.
Now, your wife was trained as an architect.
That's right.
And she's given up doing that for a while.
That's right.
Now, you have 2 daughters. One of your daughters has severe learning disabilities as well. And how did that affect you and your wife?
In fact, one of the things that happened because of our son was we built up a tremendous community of people, whether it was the therapists or other parents with, of children with disabilities. And so we were involved in that community. By the time our youngest daughter came into our lives, I must say we had the richness of this community to support us. And it turned, when we recognized very early on, and Anu and I, and Anu in particular, was very quick to realize that she will need additional help. And so we found this school actually in Vancouver, BC, which was all around neuroplasticity. The idea was you can train your brain to learn, so instead of compensating. And so we decided that, we're going to move the family to Vancouver. Zain was going to stay with me in Seattle. My daughters and my wife were going to live in Vancouver. We were going to commute again over the weekends. But the thing that all, quite honestly, that is where it came all naturally to us, because in some sense, Zain had taught us what it takes to give people with disabilities the best shot, and so it's something that we took on.
And your son lives with you now.
Yes.
And one of the qualities that you say you got from all this was empathy, and that the result of having empathy made you a better CEO and a better person. Is that fair?
Yeah. In fact, when I look at empathy, and most people think empathy is just something that you reserve, for your life and your family and your friends or what have you. But the reality is, I think it's an existential priority for a business. Because if you look at it, like, what is our business? Our business is to meet unmet, unarticulated needs of customers. There is no way our innovation to meet unmet, unarticulated needs is going to come about if we don't listen, not just listen to the words, but don't go deep to understand what the needs are behind it. So I think empathy is core to innovation. And life's experience, if you listen and you learn from, teaches you. I wouldn't claim, as I've sort of even talked about it, with any innate capability of empathy that I was born with. If anything, it's life that has taught me. And if anything, my pursuit is every year, is there growing sense of empathy for people around me?
So that's Satya Nadella for you. So let us give a perspective. In 1992, when Satya came to US and he joined Microsoft, even in this wildest of the dreams, you would have never thought that one day he'll become the CEO of Microsoft. Imagine the might of 1992's Microsoft. And this normal guy from Hyderabad, and he is not an IIT product, of course, went on to work at Microsoft, and he would never dreamt about that. And when he joined the Microsoft, he became the CEO of Microsoft in February of 2014. Microsoft was really having the worst time in its entire history. It was called the lost decade of Microsoft under Steve Ballmer. 4 of the most important innovations in the last 20 years were missed by Microsoft. Cloud computing, mobile telephony, search engine, social network. No Microsoft. If there was any company there with 95% market share in desktop, if there was any company that should have actually been there in all these 4 stages, it should have been Microsoft. But Microsoft was so pretty sitting with their Office applications and other things that they missed out completely. And once you miss the bus, guys, it's almost impossible to catch it back. And he is now single-handedly converting people from this very high sense of that I know it all to the very high sense of I can learn it all. And he's making people listen. And look how vulnerable he is. He's admitting that I have a child who is having cerebral palsy. I have a daughter who is having learning disabilities. And through them, I have learned to empathize, and that's why I'm the CEO today. Only the 3rd CEO of Microsoft after Bill Gates, Steve Ballmer, and then Satya Nadella. And he's going strong right now. He's younger than many people in the room as we're talking.
He has studied in Manipal Engineering College.
Absolutely. Right?
He was very much junior to be in the same college.
Yeah?
But
So
he got admission to merit. And he came there along with his wife. She was also studying there.
absolutely. Absolutely. So 2 things which I want to burst here is that not necessarily that you have to have the best of academic qualifications to make it to the top. Academic qualifications can at best give you the benefit of doubt. Like my academic qualifications can at best give me a chance to stand here. But by no means will you listen to me because of my academic qualifications. You listen to me because of the content, nothing else. So I just get the benefit of doubt to come here, and same applies there. So many of you might get into this massive urge to socialize with everybody in this audience at the tea break, at the lunch break. Don't fall for that trap. If you have content, guys, people will reach you out. And if you don't have content, even your best contacts will avoid you. Keep that in mind. So start with empathy. Try to listen to people. Don't start with an idea. And for you to develop that empathy, what is equally critical for you to understand is how do you listen? Listening is an art. Not hearing, listening. And unfortunately, in the social media world where people are terribly busy even right now, checking their emails that never came, we are losing on listening. We are just not good listeners at all. We are good speakers, often nonsensical, but we are not good listeners. And you know for a fact that the bosses whom you loved the most are the bosses who listen to you. Am I right? They're not the people who are the most brilliant out there. They don't have the highest IQ, but they have the highest EQ, emotional quotient. And as leaders and leaders in the making who have been somehow pushed to the back of the room, they're quite unfortunate though, is that deep listening is a source of insight. When you are listening deep, not listening at the surface, listening deep. And let me tell you, can we cultivate deep listening? The answer is yes. Through this little expedition here, I would teach you a technique of how can you listen better. And my request to all of you is your real test of character happens at lunch. As a matter of fact, your real test of character happens at lunch. Do you talk more or do you listen more at lunch? Because I'll tell you something interesting. Though I may not be at all comparable in age, but I think I have had a rich privilege of meeting some of these people who have a lot of experience. And through that rub-off effect, I have got a bit of insights to offer to you, is that the more you talk, the more naked you become. Keep that in mind. The more you talk, the more naked you become. Then what do you say? The other guy has lost interest in you. 20 minutes, done. He is like looking for where to kind of escape from this monologue. Not a dialogue, monologue. And many people in this very authoritative position that they hold in organizations, which might be completely accidental, because they have been at the right place at the right time or had the right connections to leverage, assume that they have nothing to learn. They have only something to say or something to share. And I think the moment you stop learning, you die, you rot, you start rotting. So how do you develop deep listening? Now this is an amazing piece by this gentleman called Julian Treasure, where he talks about how can you cultivate deep listening. And I'll leave you with this very interesting technique which you should use, I strongly believe, in your personal life as well as professional life. Back home, when your spouse is talking to you about something, don't assume that you have to respond to her. Don't assume that you have to solve all the problems. You know what your wife or spouse is asking you is to listen, not to solve. But most mere mortals, men, assume that if your wife is telling you something, she's actually seeking an advice. And if you can't give her advice, you feel less of a man. She doesn't want an advice from you. She just wants you to listen. And oftentimes it's so painful to just listen. So try and see if you can use this habit. Let me roll the video for all of you here. I need the sound, guys.
60% of our communication time listening, but we're not very good at it. We retain just 25% of what we hear. Now, not you, not this talk, but that is generally true. Let's define listening as making meaning from sound. It's a mental process, and it's a process of extraction. We use some pretty cool techniques to do this. One of them is pattern recognition. So in a cocktail party like this, if I say, David, Sarah, pay attention, some of you just sat up. We recognize patterns to distinguish noise from signal, and especially our name. Differencing is another technique we use. If I left this pink noise on for more than a couple of minutes, you would literally cease to hear it. We listen to differences, we discount sounds that remain the same. And then there is a whole range of filters. These filters take us from all sound down to what we pay attention to. Most people are entirely unconscious of these filters, but they actually create our reality in a way because they tell us what we're paying attention to right now. I'll give you one example of that. Intention is very important in sound, in listening. When I married my wife, I promised her that I would listen to her every day as if for the first time. Now that's something I fall short of on a daily basis. But it's a great intention to have in a relationship. But that's not all. Sound places us in space and in time. If you close your eyes right now in this room, you're aware of the size of the room from the reverberation and the bouncing of the sound off the surfaces. And you're aware of how many people are around you because of the micro noises you're receiving. And sound places us in time as well, because sound always has time embedded in it. In fact, I would suggest that our listening is the main way that we experience the flow of time from past to future. So, sonority is time and meaning, a great quote. I said at the beginning, we're losing our listening. Why did I say that? Well, there are a lot of reasons for this. First of all, we invented ways of recording. First writing, then audio recording, and now video recording as well. The premium on accurate and careful listening has simply disappeared. Secondly, the world is now so noisy, with this cacophony going on visually and auditorily, it's just hard to listen. It's tiring to listen. Many people take refuge in headphones, but they turn big public spaces like this, shared soundscapes, into millions of tiny little personal sound bubbles. In this scenario, nobody's listening to anybody. We're becoming impatient. We don't want oratory anymore, we want sound bites. And the art of conversation is being replaced, dangerously, I think, by personal broadcasting. I don't know how much listening there is in this conversation, which is sadly very common, especially in the UK. We're becoming desensitized. Our media have to scream at us with these kind of headlines in order to get our attention. And that means it's harder for us to pay attention to the quiet, the subtle, the understated. This is a serious problem that we're losing our listening. This is not trivial. Because listening is our access to understanding. Conscious listening always creates understanding. And only without conscious listening can these things happen. A world where we don't listen to each other at all is a very scary place indeed. So I'd like to share with you 5 simple exercises, tools you can take away with you to improve your own conscious listening. Would you like that? Good. The first one is silence. Just 3 minutes a day of silence is a wonderful exercise to reset your ears and to recalibrate so that you can hear the quiet again. If you can't get absolute silence, go for quiet. That's absolutely fine. Second, I call this the mixer. So even if you're in a noisy environment like this, and we all spend a lot of time in places like this, listen in the coffee bar to how many channels of sound can I hear? How many individual channels in that mix am I listening to? You can do it in a beautiful place as well, like a lake. How many birds am I hearing? Where are they? Where are those ripples? It's a great exercise for improving the quality of your listening. Third, this exercise I call savoring, and this is a beautiful exercise. It's about enjoying mundane sounds. This, for example, is my tumble dryer. It's a waltz. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. I love it. Or just try this one on for size. Wow. So mundane sounds can be really interesting if you pay attention. I call that the hidden choir. It's around us all the time. The next exercise is probably the most important of all of these. If you just take one thing away, this is listening positions. The idea that you can move your listening position to what's appropriate to what you're listening to. This is playing with those filters. You remember I gave you those filters at the beginning? It's starting to play with them as levers, to get conscious about them and to move to different places. These are just some of the listening positions or scales of listening positions that you can use. There are many. Have fun with that. It's very exciting. And finally, an acronym. You can use this in listening, in communication, if you're in any one of those roles, and I think that probably is everybody who's listening to this talk. The acronym is RASA, which is the Sanskrit word for juice or essence. And RASA stands for receive, which means pay attention to the person, appreciate, making little noises like, oh, okay. Summarize, the word so is very important in communication, and ask questions afterwards.
That's it. So one technique which I want you to learn is called RASA. If there's one takeaway that I would want you to have from my session, of course I would want you to have more than one, but if still it is one, it is RASA technique. Receive, then appreciate the other person. Then summarize. Summarize means, am I getting what you are saying? Is it right? Are you saying this? Summarize what the other person is saying, and only then ask. Never start by asking. Tell me honestly, if there are two people whom you meet, the one person who lets you talk and the other person who doesn't let you talk, whom are you most likely to visit and meet again? Tell me. The one who lets you talk. So what is the best way of communication? Talking or listening? Listening. It's pretty simple. It's not talking, it's listening. I am talking right now because this is my job right now, but if you cross my path outside, you would see me 90% of the time listening to you. Because listening is also far more enriching than talking. And I tell you what, guys, listening is also far more selfish than talking. Because at the end of the time, at the end of this little thing of 20 minutes of talking, what is the delta addition to your knowledge which has happened? What's about 10 minutes of listening? What's the delta addition to knowledge which has happened to you? That's a fundamental question. So if you're really selfish, you would rather listen more than talk more. At your home, with your family members, at your office, learn to have the rasa. Receive, appreciate, summarize, and ask. Now, as Indians, we are awful in appreciation. We don't appreciate. We don't appreciate each other adequately. We think वो तो अपना काम कर रहा है. What's the big deal in that? He's just doing his job. It is his job. And I was so thrilled at the start of the session that Sir had felicitated the office bearers and the people who had put countless hours into this. And that's a very important message to be carried. The person might be doing his job, but for him to continue to do a good job, he still needs appreciation. Am I right? We are not liberal in appreciating people. हाँ ठीक है, क्या फर्क पड़ता है, काम कर रहा है. Well, he is doing right now out of intrinsic motivation, and a bit of extrinsic motivation would not really hurt. If you go to America, they start appreciating you even for the most mundane things. Thank you so much. If you open a door for them, they say thank you so much. If you do some trivial things, they say thank you so much. And as a result, you develop a culture of appreciation. Appreciate the people who have problem. Only then you can solve the problem. If you don't acknowledge that there is a problem, how can you solve the problem? If you say to the customer, you know, you don't know how to use my product. It's your problem. It's not my problem. Now I'll educate you. As a matter of fact, guys, the best made products don't need any manual. Have you ever seen a child reading a manual before learning how to play a game? Let's go to page number 23 now. And let's see how to play Ludo. How do children learn to play games? Tell me, how do children learn to play games? By trial and error. Not by reading manual, not by getting instructions, not by getting coaching or learning or training. They learn it on the go. So the best products, the best services are highly intuitive. And they're intuitive not because you want them to learn through you, but you let them learn. And as Steve Jobs very famously said, that I make products that your grandchild and your grandmother both can use. That's what Steve Jobs said. And the last thing that I want to offer to all of you, I'm duplicating myself there perhaps, is park your judgment. Honestly speaking, the moment I came here, every single person in this audience were judging me. And that's the reason I had to have a lengthy introduction to overcompensate your judgmental biases. All of you are judging me. And you would have a very different reaction when you meet me now in the corridor. I was still there out in the corridor at the tea break. But you will have a very different reaction with me when you meet me after this talk in the corridor. Because some of your judgments have been corrected.